In today's video, we are going on a journey. I am taking you from start to finish of my latest build, which is the Black Lake from Harry Potter in model form. Welcome back if you are one of my subscribers, or just welcome if you're new to the channel. Either way, let's get on with the building and I will explain what's going on as we proceed. Cut to some rainy November evening in England, and here you can see I am making an initial concept sketch of my idea. Basically the gist is it's Hagrid's hut, which is on the edge of the Forbidden Forest, and then I just got carried away with drawing Schleich figurines that I had in Harry Potter form. For reference, here are some Google images I found that match the colour palette that I was imagining in my head, and it really helped to explain to other people that what I wanted to create was a lake edge, not a river edge. I mean, clearly there's a massive difference, though I think when people were seeing the model halfway through the build, there was some confusion, which I found offensive. Anyway, that's besides the point. Here we are in the workshop, and I had found a scrap piece of plywood, which I'm going to be using as the base of my model, and clearly I'm just demonstrating that it's solid. Now, how I was going to create my lake and river... No, not river. Lake edge. That really threw me off. No, basically, I found this scrap foam, so it's scrap wood, scrap foam, it's very economical, and I was going to use the foam to create high ground, and then in the basin, the resin would be poured. A week prior to this filming day, I was inducted onto a lot of machines in the workshop, including the hot wire cutter. This will be used to cut my foam, and it's super simple. You just turn it on, and you press the pedal with your foot to heat the wire. There's my lovely running trainers. It's almost time to cut the first piece, but wait. The wire wasn't hot enough. I was impatient. Try again in a second. This machine's also in a ventilator, which I turned on before using it, so all the fumes from the hot foam were going to get sucked away and I wasn't breathing them in, so that was a plus. Oh, look at that wire go. It's like a hot knife through butter, or just a hot wire through foam. I'm sorry, I'll stop, but seriously, it was very satisfying. I ended up using the thickest pieces of foam for the lake edge, and I worked out sort of a puzzle-like map to fit them together, so it wasn't very exact, but it did the job. One tip I did discover though is that you didn't have to hold the foam to the base of the machine. You could hold it on an angle, and that sort of allowed me to flatten out the cut I was making, which definitely made it more realistic because it did go through a phase of looking a bit rough. Yeah, that definitely was a game changer because you got variation in the depth of the riverbed, which was amazing and definitely looked more like earth, so I was really pleased with that. I then got really into it and started adding more variation further back from where the edge of the water was going to be, and I will say, like, I think it helped, but it would be better if the wire I was using was curved or something. I know you can get handheld hot wire tools. I didn't have one of those, so I tried to do the best I could with the machine I had and sort of was relying on fixing it later on in the process. As you can probably tell from the footage, this part of the process took a while. I think I was stood up in the workshop for about 3 hours without water, stopping for a break. I honestly didn't realise I was in a trance. It just became my lifestyle for those 3 hours. But I think it was worth it because yeah, this was like going to give the structure for the rest of the project, so I needed to get this right, so I'm pleased I did spend the time to do this correctly. I thought the foam and the wood were really easy to work with. I literally didn't need anything special. I could just use hot glue to stick them together, so it was nothing fancy and it was really straightforward. As I was working with scrap pieces of foam, I did have gaps between the pieces. I couldn't just use one big piece to make the base, so I went in and filled in the cracks with hot glue and smaller pieces of foam, which I sort of wedged in the void, as I called it. This didn't really fix the problem, but it did help because I then later went and just hot glued and like dumped a load of hot glue in between all of those big holes, so it did help reduce the amount of glue I needed. And finally, in a last-ditch attempt to kind of get rid of some of those stronger lines from the wire cutter, I did try and scratch off some of the foam to get rid of the harshness. It was mildly successful. And finally, it was time to leave the workshop. Thank goodness it was quiet that day because I literally took over the main workbench and the wire cutting area, so yeah, it was time for me to go. Here is the base and what it's looking like at the moment. I did add in some little rocks to the lake bed, which work well. I filled in the cracks with hot glue, and I just was going to start painting it because honestly I wasn't sure if the hot glue was going to be enough or whether I was going to have to add something on top to make it smoother. Cut to the painting studio.
What I mean.
Okay, let's do that. I mean, you've got to love the optimism.
Oh my gosh, it's so cute.
I mean, honestly, I'm quite funny. Anyway, I used gesso primer to cover the whole thing in white, and it kind of turned it into an ice cream land, which was quite cool. Then I whipped out the hairdryer to get rid of the wetness, and I immediately started then with acrylic paint, and just started colouring it basically to look like a lake bed and lake edge. I added shading where there would be a dark shadow, like underneath the rocks and stuff, and you can see in the background I had my iPad up with the reference images I showed at the start to kind of help me with the colours. I used a fat paintbrush and didn't water down the paint at all because I wanted a thick coverage, and I definitely had the idea that it was going to be like a rough, ugly first layer and then I can build on top of it. I mean, this model went through many ugly baby stages, and it's not until like the very end did I think, yes, that looks good. Though I didn't despair at this point because I knew what it was going to look like in the end, and I could see the vision, so that's all that mattered really. Despite multiple comments that it looked like Shrek. I mean, if we're being honest, I do see it. Anyway, not to worry though, that's besides the point. I did 2 layers of acrylic paint, and when I was happy with it, we went back to the workshop to start with the resin. Now, I was really excited about this. It was my first time actually using it for one of my projects. I'd been inducted, but yeah, I was just excited to start. First of all, I got these acrylic sheets, and you had to cut them to make a barrier for the resin to stop it just running off of my model. It's also quite funny because these pieces of acrylic I'm using are offcuts from other people's projects because the scale I'm working on is quite small, so I swear I'm just reusing all of the things that are like around the workshop for this project. Also, as you can probably tell from the video, I was really struggling operating this with one hand because the acrylic kept wobbling about, but we got there in the end. Then all you have to do with your sheets of acrylic is make a corner piece, and you have to dump a load of hot glue on it, stick it to your model, and basically you've got to really make sure the cracks are sealed so the resin doesn't pour out. The way it was explained to me is that resin is more liquid than water, and any like little gap it will find, and then because it's sort of quite thick, it will just pour out of there. So that was the biggest fear of mine, and I probably overdid it with the hot glue and went like to the opposite extreme and just covered my bit of wood and the acrylic in hot glue, but it was for the best, I think. Quite a few hot glue sticks later, this is what we are left with. Like I said, it's in its 3rd, 4th ugly baby stage, but not to worry, it's gonna look cool at the end. Now, to handle the resin, you've got to put on your protective gloves and then decide on what kind of ratio you're using. So, as instructed by the technician, I am not an expert in this, but as instructed by the technician, I used the glass cast 50 for this lake bed because it's based on the depth of the pour. I think I'm saying that right, but like I said, I'm not an expert. This was my first time doing it. You have to mix in a 2-to-1 ratio the resin to the hardener, and yeah, get your ratios correct. Otherwise it won't set properly. It will never set. It will just be tacky. So that was another thing I was really keen to avoid. And the thing is, you literally won't be able to tell if you've done it correctly or not until you come back in a few days and check it. And at that point, you've already poured into the lake bed that you've spent quite a while creating. So I was very careful about this, and I think it was really lucky actually, because this was literally the last resin in the bottle. So phew. After the glass cast 50 resin, we're following that with the glass cast 50 hardener. I mean, say that 5 times fast. In it goes. Whoop. Right, my friends, once you've mixed your ratios correctly, it's actually time to mix them. I'm using a lolly stick with the end snapped off to be able to get into the corners, because this is a very important step. You have to mix for quite some time to make sure all the resin is combined with the hardener, otherwise you might end up with a tacky end result, which nobody wants. I also put 1 drop of blue colouring in, which I mixed in thoroughly to the mix. And I didn't put more than this in because it only was to take away the completely transparentness of the resin, and I didn't know if it was going to react badly with the acrylic paint on the wood. Now, another thing that can go wrong with resin is having loads of air bubbles in your final set model. There's a bit of a pattern here. There's loads of things that can go wrong with resin now that I'm thinking about it. But to try and help with the air bubble situation, I put my pot of mix into the decompression machine, which was supposed to sort of draw out all the air to the top. And then you leave it sit for about 5 minutes. It felt like longer. Now it is time to pour the resin, and thankfully just before I did it, the technician came in and she offered me this wonderful advice, and it was to pour the resin into one corner of the lake so it would sort of rise naturally like water filling up. So without further ado, it is time to pour, the moment of truth. Dum dum! Oh, it's so satisfying. And yes, this is real time. It is just that thick. The main body of water is now poured, and whilst I was doing that, I decided I was going to create some puddles. So I mixed up another batch of resin. This one is much smaller, and I added quite a few drops of black dye, and I just dropped it with my lolly stick into some of the natural dips that I had created on the base of my foam model. And now the resin is completely poured, I put my creation up on the drying rack and made sure it was covered with another acrylic sheet of plastic whilst I was away over the weekend to stop any dust settling on top of it. It takes a few days to dry, but I'm leaving it for about 5 just to be sure. The following week I went back to retrieve my model, and oh my goodness, I was so excited. The resin completely set, there was no tackiness in sight, so that means I did all the steps correctly, and I was really pleased about that. The last thing I had to do in the workshop was break off where I had hot glued the acrylic plastic to the size of my model, and it was easier said than done, but using all my weight I managed to get there in the end. I think I had dumped a bit too much hot glue, but you know what, it did not leak at all, so that was enough for me. Maybe next time I will use a bit less, but yeah, no, maybe not. I got a bit frustrated with this bit in the end, and actually I just needed to use a bit more brute force, and then it came off fine.
That's one way to do it.
Boom. Oh my gosh, the resin is so good. It literally looks like water. It's so shiny, and yes, I love it. I'm very excited. One of the final stages of the process was making the ground more realistic. I had ordered from Amazon this model railway scatter ground thing that people use with their train sets. It was from Amazon by this company called Javis, and the one I ordered was dark earth, and it was supposed to be a forest floor type look. So I thought that sounded relevant to what I was trying to create, and I used PVA glue to attach it to my base. To be honest, at this point, I was a bit sceptical about what it was adding to the overall look of the model. I think texture-wise it's good, but I don't know if I'm fully convinced that it looks like dark earth. I'm not sure. I think this combined with my paintwork, and then with the sticky tufts of grass that are also from a model railway, I think it does look quite convincing. So this was the very final step in the process, and we are on to the photos. I hope you enjoyed the video montage from my photo shoot in the garden. Now, finally, here are the finished photos from my model. I am so pleased with the final outcome from this project. I think the photos look amazing, and I'm really pleased with the physical model itself as well as the videos. I think it's all really cool and exactly what I was aiming for. In the end, I didn't add any trees or much detail to the base, and I think this has actually worked quite well because it's meant that I could use lots of different size Schleich figurines on the base and it still look right. So yeah, I'm quite pleased about that, and it gives me more freedom to experiment with scale and perspective. So that's something I tried when I was doing the photos. And finally, the last little detail I added to my project was editing some of my photos in Procreate, where I just really pushed the realism of the story I was trying to tell. I added light and reflections on the Patronus, the wand and the Dementor, and it just looks so cool. Here is the first photo I edited, and then they get better as I go along, so I just absolutely love them. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to my channel for more model scenes, and let me know down below which photo was your favourite. I'll see you in my next upload. Bye!